Hi, everyone. Welcome to Grow and Scale, brought to you by Financial Sense. I'm Blake Oliver, your host of this series and the accounting podcast. Financial Sense is accounting practice management software built to help you scale your firm. And they have been recently very busy with WorkflowCon, the first of its kind conference focused on helping you streamline and maximize your accounting workflows to get work done. We're going to put the link to the WorkflowCon playlist on YouTube. I highly recommend you take a look at that. Great speakers. Jason Statz is in there talking about technology. And so if you are looking at practice management software, looking at ways to streamline your firm, I highly recommend you check that out. I think they had thousands of people watch this thing. So
Yeah, they
I
had some
think,
incredible speakers. I was at Deeper Weekend at the time. It overlapped, but yeah, no, Kelly Parks did a session. They had a great lineup for sure.
well, and now we get to follow on with another great speaker. Rachel Fish has joined me. Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Blake, how are you doing?
Niching or niching is a hot topic among many firm owners, and they wonder if it's right for them, how to get started, and pitfalls to avoid. And today we have the benefit of speaking with somebody who is deeply familiar with niching or niching. Rachel, how do you say it?
I'm Canadian, so we say niche. It's a
Niche,
French word, so it's niche.
niche. And you speak French. You're actually trilingual because you speak English, French, and accounting.
None of them particularly well. So yes, of course, Canada is bilingual. My grandfather actually, when he moved over from Scotland, him and his family, they settled in Quebec, which seems very odd. But yeah, no, it's yeah, a little bit of French in there too.
Welcome, everyone who's joined us. If you're in Zoom with us, you can chat, you can ask questions. We don't have any slides today. This is a conversation, so feel free to
Just
participate.
chatting. Yeah.
You can let us know what you think in the chat. State your opinions in the chat. State your questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to those. And yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you, Rachel, about niching
Sure.
because you have a firm that is niched, and you previously owned a firm. I think everybody should know this, that you had a bookkeeping firm that got acquired by Deloitte, which is pretty cool.
It did not get acquired by Deloitte. So I had it. I
Yeah.
left it to go to Deloitte. I thought there would be a sale opportunity. Instead, it kind of imploded quite brilliantly. So yeah, no, that's a
Well,
much better. I like your story better, Blake. Let's go with that.
you got acquired by Deloitte, which
I
is kind of
got,
like
I
the same
personally
thing.
got,
Yeah.
yes, yes,
And
that's
then we share the same experience where that happened to me, actually, exactly the same thing, where I went to a large top 25 firm here in the US, not a Deloitte. But they acquired me, and then I burned out after like a year. I couldn't handle the pace of change. So we've
yeah,
had kind of a similar experience. And you also have worked in technology companies.
yeah.
You were at Sage for a while.
I
Um,
was 3.5 years.
yeah,
Yeah,
and now you've had director executive roles at other firms,
yeah,
and now you're back doing your own thing. You bought a practice.
right. And I bought a niche firm. So previously, and it's kind of funny because for those who kind of weren't in the cloud or the Twitter space, back in the day, so I had my practice was called FishBooks, which is why my Twitter is FishBooks. um, and so that was like 2011 to 2016. And then, of course, Deloitte and then Sage. And then I worked mergers and acquisitions. And then where we also were actually working on an industry vertical strategy. So like niching, but in a larger firm. So how do you do that if you can't, turn your whole firm into a single niche? And then yeah, I just thought it was my time to get back in it. And so I purchased a niche firm. And so it's been really interesting over these last, 15 months that I've owned that. It specializes in real estate agents and brokers specifically. So even when you say real estate, that sounds like a niche, but there are so many like sub niches and other things that you could do. Like Brandon Hall, for example, right, has a fantastic niche around real estate investments, right? Property owners and investors and things like that. There are people that just focus on property development and construction. So they'll have real estate, as a niche. But I work specifically with the agents and the brokers.
Agents and brokers. All
Correct.
right. And real estate, I imagine it seems to be like one of the most popular niches? I guess just because
Sure.
why is real estate a good niche?
Well, I probably have a lot more reasons why it's not. But it's just honestly, it's just because of the sheer volume. So, like, for example, I think in Ontario here in Canada, I think we've got like 90,000 real estate agents. But part of niching, of course, is knowing that market and being able to really dig in a lot deeper. So, sure, there may be 90,000 people who have the real estate license. That may not necessarily mean that they are full-time working agents, right? It may be that they work for a construction company or they're an owner of a construction company and they don't want to give away their commissions on these, houses that they build. Or they may only work with close friends and family. So now it's taking, okay, right, that TAM, SAM, SOM is what's the opportunity? So what are the total number of agents? And then paring down with your client profile, which are going to actually be a really great fit for us. And of course, I've dug really deep on that over the last year as well.
Now, do you work with a specific type of broker or agent? Like, I know there are some folks who only work with, like, I met a guy who only does Keller Williams real estate agents. Are you that narrow?
I'm not that narrow, but I can definitely understand the benefit of being that narrow. Because again, it's a whole industry that the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. So some of these brokerages are very different. And so we also have to be careful with wording. So depending on the structure of the brokerage, it could be the brand, right? So Keller Williams is the brand. And then you've got your broker of record. So those offices that are owned by, usually they're independently owned, but they still have that common brand, almost like a franchisor model. And then within a brokerage, there could be many different teams, which can operate as their own little sub or side brokerage. And then, of course, you've got the agents themselves. So there's actually a lot of complexity in terms of like who all is dictating what their financial statements should look like. So does the brand have a template that they want all of their stores or all of their brokerages to be using? Does a brokerage have that? Sometimes when agents are working with specific coaches have specific financial statements and metrics that they want their clients to use. So yeah, it's more complex the deeper you dig, for sure.
So why did you choose to buy a niched firm?
Oh man, the forever question. What were you doing? What were you thinking? So it was actually due to, and this is one thing that I will say across the board, something to pay attention to if you're thinking about what niche to go into. Pay attention to regulation changes in your area. And so in this case, what happened was in Ontario in the fall of 2020, there was a major regulation change that meant that real estate agents who until that point in Ontario could only be self-employed commission independent contractors, right? So they could not incorporate. Now, all of a sudden, they could incorporate. And so what this meant from a tax perspective was that as a sole proprietor, and I'm not sure what the equivalent would be in the US, a Schedule C, I think, comes to mind, but basically you have to report all of your income within the tax year and pay tax on 100% of your income. There are write-offs that are available to you as an independent contractor, but basically that's how that works. Now, all of a sudden, we're able to use a personal corporation, very similar to what lawyers and doctors have with professional corporations. We can now have what's called a personal corporation. And so what that means is that they could keep some of their income within the corporation, be taxed at the corporate rate, and then only report on their personal income, the dividends or the wages that they took out of their corporation. And so like this, it's not going to make as big a difference to somebody who is, they're living off of everything that they earn, they're spending everything that they make. There's nothing to leave in the corporation, but you can imagine those agents and top producers that are like $1 to $3 plus million. having to pay in Canada like upwards of 50% tax before deductions. Now having an opportunity to keep whatever money they don't need to pay their personal bills, keep it in the corporation at a nice little 12.2%, and then only be taxed personally on the money they take out. So it's definitely a strong tax deferral strategy. And so what ended up happening when this regulation came through is I started to pay attention to a lot of what the other accountants and bookkeepers were doing. And they were really focusing on, let us help you get incorporated. Now you've got these new requirements of you. Let us help you do your books and your taxes and that kind of thing. And at the time, this firm did that. But remember, I didn't work here at the time. I was actually at Sage at the time, fall of 2020. So I was sitting there going, I see what everybody else is doing, but I think that there's an opportunity. I'm not sure what it is yet, but at the time I saved a couple of accounting and real estate related social media handles. I saved some domains, right? Registered some domains. There's an opportunity here. I'm not quite sure what it is.
So you've been thinking about this for a while.
This has been 3 years in the making, even though I've only owned it for about 14 months, which is what's so weird about the whole thing. So
you saw a gap. You saw there was something missing.
There was definitely a gap. And so while the gap that they were filling was at the agent level, it was, you're going to need bookkeeping, you're going to need different kinds of taxes done. For me, I started thinking about, what is this actually going to mean to the brokerages that up until this point have only worked with independent contractors, and what kinds of changes might they expect when now all of these agents are becoming incorporated? Are they going to have to increase transparency and visibility on some financial information that they didn't have to previously? They now have agents that have bookkeepers and that have accountants and that are probably asking for information that they didn't used to. And so what does that mean? And again, the deeper you go, right, the more you realize you don't know. So I was kind of attacking it from a slightly different angle. I was looking at it from the broker side. In Canada, brokerages are still on desktop. They're still very paper heavy. So of course, my first thing is, that's got to change. I mean, we've been working in cloud since 2011, 2010, like it's now 2020. And, all these brokerages are very paper heavy, very admin heavy. The number one, broker back office software here in Canada is desktop. It's kind of a beast. It does the same with like any custom software where it does the front end really well, does the back end of accounting terribly. So it's basically that. And so I started looking out for, what are the technology solutions that could help here? And so I then spent the next 2 years basically fine tuning a complete cloud end-to-end workflow. And so fast forward.
Specifically, you're talking workflow for the brokerage.
For brokerages, yes. Okay. Fast forward a couple of years.
For those who just aren't familiar, let's take a step back for a second and just explain, what is the brokerage?
So the brokerage is typically your local office that, manages the deals for however many agents they may have in the brokerage. I mean, there are some that have, boutique ones that are like 10, 20, 50. There are other ones that are in the hundreds and thousands that manage that. But basically, it's all of the deal stuff. And so it has a very different focus than the agents do. So fast forward, working mergers and acquisitions, I was getting asked all the time, hey, talk to my buddy, he wants to sell his firm, or hey, talk to this person over there, they're interested in the market, that kind of thing. And so it was a mutual contact that reached out, hey, my buddy's selling his firm, can you talk to him for a few minutes? I'm like, well, yeah, sure, just to, see what kind of insights I can add or whatever, how I can help. And it happened to be this firm, Realty Tax. And I was like, oh my goodness, you've got to be kidding me. So just jumped on a call. I'm just gonna, I certainly had no intention of buying a firm at that point. Just gonna jump on this call and help him out. And, what can I do? But of course, the very first question I asked was, so how come you don't work with more brokerages? Well, we really like to work in the cloud, and you can't really work in the cloud with a brokerage. And I'm like, well, actually, you can. And I've spent the last 2 years doing it. And here's the technology. And this is what you would need and all of those other things. And so after a few conversations, it was like, well, either I'm going to build one from scratch, but this is definitely a need, or, I mean, if it's for sale, I could, kind of fast forward my growth a little bit and knock out, because they're going to sell to somebody. So probably a bigger person, bigger firm or whatever. So I can basically buy the firm, fast forward my own growth, and knock out a competitor kind of all at once. So that's what I ended up doing.
So to summarize, you identified this growing need in your market,
A regulation driven need,
regulation driven need, which is always good because there's savings to be had, right? And if you help professionals save taxes, you can capture a portion of that value.
for sure.
So you identified that, you saw that a few years, and then you developed a workflow that could help you do that efficiently.
Yeah.
In the cloud.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important aspect of niching is the technology, because
Absolutely.
right, a big reason we haven't been able to niche in the past is because we could only serve people in our local community, because
Right.
we had to drive to their offices.
Right.
And there are only so many brokerages around you, I'm sure, Rachel, right? Locally. Like you, because you live pretty.
I live in a pretty small town.
Yeah.
I live 90 minutes west of Toronto. But I mean, our town is only like 9,000 people. Like it's not.
Right. So, how many real estate agents are there locally? How many brokerages? Not that many, right?
It couldn't support a 5-person business. That's for sure.
So you've got brokerages all over the place, all over the country, and
we now
out?
have them. We now have them coast to coast. We've got them from BC to Nova Scotia. So when I purchased the firm, first of all, they were CPAs. So I was purchasing a non-CPA was purchasing a CPA firm. Now I can't actually do that because non-CPAs can't own professional corporations, right? We can't own shares in CPA firms, and in Canada, in Ontario specifically. And so we had to actually deregister the firm so that I could purchase it. But what that meant was that they were no longer restricted by, kind of being mandated by CPA Ontario. And so that by deregistering it as a CPA firm, we actually then also unlocked Canada as a whole as a market. And so we've got clients from BC to Nova Scotia now.
As a CPA, that causes me pain, but I see the logic there. I mean,
it worked well for us.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And there are still challenges though, because if we've got a client who's purchasing a property or needs a mortgage and needs completion engagement or whatever, now it's okay, are we going to sub that out? Are we going to use something like stamped.ai? Like what now we've got a different pain point to solve. Previously, they could just do the work and sign off on it. Now, that's kind of an exception to the services that we can offer.
So we've walked through how you got into this niche.
Yeah.
What do you see as the big benefits to you?
Oh gosh.
We can talk about disadvantages too. I know you've been you just passed your first full year of ownership.
Yeah.
So like, do you want to, maybe we should start with that. Like, what's the hardest thing about it, or the most painful part?
I think the most painful part is realizing that maybe all of the maybe not rumors, maybe that's the wrong word, all of the preconceptions about real estate agents are 1,000% true. So that was really interesting to dig into in terms of they're terrible with their money, they're high maintenance clients, like all of those generalities. So first of all, I could probably say that there are a lot of industries that sound like that, right? Lawyers sounds like that. I could never do a lawyer niche. But some people love it and do amazing at it, and kudos to them. But what it did allow me to do was so yes, we're learning this stuff. All that did was force us to have to narrow our ideal client profile, our ICP. So we learned very quickly then which clients were actually not a fit for the kind of firm that we were morphing into from when the sellers owned it to when I'm owning it, because we wanted to kind of avoid that. But it also raised some really interesting challenges. So generally speaking, real estate agents are terrible with their money. So I actually took that and dug into what is it that real estate agents learn, specifically in Ontario, and then kind of widening out to the different provinces. When they get their license, what does that education look like? And so in Ontario, all of the licensing goes through one specific college. That course has zero content in terms of business acumen, financial statements or knowledge, anything related to the running of the self-employed business of being a real estate agent. And then I take a look at, okay, then once they have their license, they actually need CPE. And so what kinds of education are included in, what they get CPE for? None of it has to do with business knowledge, financials, like none of it, absolutely none of it. So sure, we can say that real estate agents are terrible with their money. They are in a, eat what you kill kind of industry that is very volatile. I mean, especially lately, we've got interest rates going crazy. We've got the market going crazy. And it directly affects their income. And so it was kind of like well, of course they're terrible with their money. They aren't ever taught it in the context of their business. And they are in an industry that does not have regular predictable wages, right? Those kinds of things. And so it was really interesting, all of the disadvantages that we were kind of struggling with in terms of, they'll ignore us for months on end. And then when they want something, they want it right this second. Because that regularity, that predictability just is not something that they're used to. And again, that, financial knowledge hasn't ever been taught as part in the context of their business. So those are disadvantages, but explainable ones. And again, the deeper we went in that, the better we then understood the types of challenges these clients had.
And it sounds like an opportunity to educate them do content marketing to draw in brokerages, agents.
It's almost like what we ended up doing. Like so it actually started.
Well, and I want our audience to know that like Rachel and I have not prepped for this at all. I am learning right now on the fly with the rest of you. So this is the first time we've spoken in like months. Actually, probably since you acquired the firm. So yeah, like how are you pairing education with marketing? I mean, I know enough about marketing to know that's really important, but like specifically in real estate, with these folks. But are you going to like go create education for them at this school?
I mean, so no. I tried, and it was extremely challenging because there are a lot of governing bodies in real estate. So there are, beyond kind of the organizational structure of, agent, team, brokerage, brand, there's also boards, right? The real estate boards of the region in which you buy and sell or broker. There are also then, like, for example, Ontario has RECO and OREA. So RECO is the Real Estate Council of Ontario. And then we also have the Ontario Real Estate Association. And so RECO comes up with the curriculum that is then taught by the college. And the college, in order to maintain being the education provider for this license, must only teach the curriculum that comes from RECO. So putting that in context, I approached the college specifically to say, like, this is a huge problem. It doesn't seem to be getting addressed by basically anybody, the association, the council, nothing. And so how do we then better prepare these agents to be managing these self-employed businesses? There's even a CPA friend of mine who teaches this course and expressed the same frustration, and yet was completely powerless because they can only teach the curriculum that comes directly from the Real Estate Council of Ontario. So it's actually at that level that we need to You start chipping away. I have reached out to contacts that I already have, that I had been introduced to, that like I've done. I mean, you know me, I'm kind of a dog with a bone
Yeah.
sometimes. And
Well, you're not
so
going to let it go, Rachel. I know
I'm not
that.
going to let it go. Like
Yeah.
this is an issue. So
Well,
to clarify the impact of this issue or to quantify it, there is a real estate brokerage pretty close to me. I mean, an hour and a half away. It has about 700 agents. So it's actually a mid-size, it's a good size brokerage. It could be considered small for the US. 60% of their agents are getting garnishments on their income due to back taxes.
hold up a second. 60%?
60%
Wow.
of agents are getting garnishments
That's,
on their wages.
and it's because they're not learning anything about accounting and tax.
Right.
They don't.
Right. So
Yeah.
there are two specific taxes that they're responsible for. One is your regular income tax. And then,
Right.
unfortunately, we have basically a VAT, or a value added tax, on services called GST or HST, depending on which province you're in, which is actually 13% of your commission. So we know they make a lot of money in short bursts. We know they're terrible with their money and putting money aside. And then add on top of it, 13% of everything that goes into their bank account is actually a tax that they owe the government, that they have to remit, basically on the brokerage's behalf. And that's not including their income tax. So it feels a little bit like they're getting set up for failure.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and so Peter in our Q&A said, has this been brought to the attention of the college? Is this an opportunity for you to somehow help the education process? And, I think you did answer that question. I mean, that's interesting. There's a limit, like the college cannot add to the curriculum, but I'm wondering if perhaps there's an opportunity to create like an extracurricular type of course that maybe the professors would share with their students as an option to, enhance beyond what they are allowed to teach in the curriculum. And I think it brings us to a really important point on niching. I'm going to say it right.
Thanks.
Which is that the best way to develop a niche is to become the go-to expert in that field, so that all the real estate people say, in Canada, say Rachel is the guru and will, make sure that I just pay what I owe and nothing more. Absolutely. Or set me up for success and make sure that I don't get garnished, my wages garnished.
Yeah.
And so creating educational content is, I think, the number one way I see firms do this, and they do it in all sorts of different ways. And I'm curious, Rachel, what are you doing in that regard?
Sure.
And, or what do you hope to do? Where are you at with that?
Sure. So yes, absolutely. It's something that we've looked at, and I'll kind of talk through our journey. I did want to mention, though, that because we not only have the licensing thing, and I think the reason why the college has to be so strict is because this isn't just a diploma or certificate. This is a license that they are the education provider for, right? So there's a little bit of a difference there. And then also they're at that same college. Of course, they're open to take whatever business course they want. The trick is actually making it part of the required curriculum. And that's the piece that hasn't been done. I also,
then the other problem with that, I just want to point out, is like a real estate agent taking accounting 101 isn't going to get a lot out of it, right?
No.
The debits and credits,
to be customized, right? It would need to be a little bit more of, I mean, the things that they need to concern themselves with are the same thing that any sole proprietor, right, self-employed person needs to do. So it doesn't even necessarily need to be real estate focused. It just would need to be not an accounting 101. It would need to be like a general business for self-employed type course.
Right.
And so the other angle that we took a look at was, we know that they need, CPE. So what if we became an education provider for CPE, where the education that we had, they could, so how do we go about that and work with the State Council of Ontario? Maybe they can't get it as part of their license, but maybe it's something that they could be motivated to take part in as part of their CPE. So that was another angle that we took. I haven't been successful so far. It's only been a year. some of these things take a lot of time. But in the meanwhile, we know we've got all of these agents and we know that they need help. And so very luckily, I have an incredible partner in Melanie Schroeder, tax manager. She also happens to be a certified counselor. And so the approach that she brings to that financial planning, tax planning, she's a taught financial literacy, not only to CPABC, but actually to CPA across Canada. So the CPA in each of the provinces would actually come and have her teach the financial literacy course. And so having somebody with that background has been phenomenal to pair with this need that we now know we have. So the idea was to, well, let's start a financial literacy course. Of course, that's the next natural thought. But when you're in a niche environment, you have to view everything you do through that niche lens. So yes, we know that there's a gap. Yes, we know what the solution is to that gap. But what happens when we go down the road and we try to market this thing? Again, think of the industry. We have very high demand. They will often spend a lot of money on sales coaches, but we also know that they have no education in this area. I think that they are also very status driven. In fact, you kind of get to know the team leaders, right? Agent, team, broker, brand. A lot of the team leaders really drive that status right into their teams from the very junior members all the way up. It's important what your address is, right? Clients need to know you live in an amazing neighborhood. It's important what car you pull up to that listing in. And so these are actually the things that can go work towards the detriment of these agents who we know are terrible with their money. So if we already were going to be facing this level of status, was there even an opportunity for them to be self-aware enough to opt into a course that is specifically for financial literacy? And what we discovered, or what we then, maybe we made some assumptions, but the idea was actually that we may not be terribly successful if we were to only deliver a financial literacy course. So we kind of flipped it on its head, where instead of trying to sell a single course, what we did is we launched an entire community. And the idea there was that it would give us an opportunity to, and this isn't just for our clients, it's for real estate agents across Canada. And then we're looking at a US expansion, of course. But the idea is that any real estate agent that has any questions to do with anything related to their business. We've talked about banking, about technology, about CRMs, about, some of your best tax tips. Melanie has a whole section in there for money mindfulness. So the opportunity for them to pop into that space and to get some of that financial literacy knowledge is there, but it's not the leading focus. It almost ends up as a byproduct of it. So we felt that it would be a better approach, instead of trying to market a financial literacy course to a very status-driven industry, that we take a bit of a different approach.
This is brilliant, because you clearly have gotten into the mind of your prospects, your clients, and you understand that when you say status, what I take that to mean is, and correct me if this is not the right way to say it, but it's like I'm a high status, real estate agent driving around in my Tesla or whatever it is, right? And I'm not gonna sit down and be a student again, right? I'm not. It takes a certain mindset to want to do a course, and maybe they're not in that mindset, but they love to network. They love to. Right. That's the job of a real estate agent, honestly, is networking, if you think about it in many ways.
Yeah.
And so a community is perfect. It fits the mindset of an agent who's going to be more attuned to that and get little doses of information in a community.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go out and create this massive course, which is a huge lift when you're really busy running a firm. You can just answer questions every day.
Right. Now, I'm actually going to just put it in the chat here so that if any of you want to check it out, again, it's very small. It's continuing to grow, but so far it's pretty small.
If you are asleep, wake up. If you're doing email on the other screen while you listen to this, pay attention, because I think I didn't know you were doing this, Rachel, but I have heard of people doing this, and
Yeah.
building communities is like such a good way to build a practice.
Absolutely. Well, especially a niche community, because you
Yeah.
can hone in on what some of those challenges are, right? So in our case, so again, some of the other assumptions, and you mentioned some of the really great ones, Blake, some of the other ones are, who else is going to be in that class? What if they see my name there? What are they going to think of me being in a financial literacy class? And how might that, change what they think of me? Um, so, I mean, it's kind of like that. Step one is to admit you have a problem. I wasn't sure how effective that would be.
Yeah.
And so that was part of the idea, just to flip it on its head a bit.
And what are you using for your community? What are you
I'm
using
using
Slack
Mighty
or are you using
Networks. Yeah, I'm
Mighty
using Mighty
Networks?
Networks,
Okay.
which I really like the look of and the feel of. We also, from a design perspective, we try to marry it as close as possible to our own website. We'll
Mhm.
be doing some additional work to make it feel much more embedded so that it doesn't feel like a whole other place. And then we also, Catherine, that name is Mighty Networks. I did take a look at Circle because I know we use that for realize.io, right? Jason Stats' community. Jason uses that, circle.io. Alyssa also, Allison McLeod, Atlanta Tax. She also uses Circle for hers. I really loved a lot more of the technology focus that we could get out of Circle. So one of the things that I really wanted to do is basically get all of the regulations, again, because it's so regulation driven. There are so many boards with so many rules, and then we've got these councils and associations, and basically have like a chatbot, a chatbot front face interface with chat thing. And so that we could, like, anytime you've got a question about anything, that this community would actually be, we would have the resources set up on the back end, but then on the front end, basically you can access any of these areas of regulation across the board. Mighty Networks is a lot trickier to make something like that happen because it's more creative friendly than it is technology friendly. So I'm still working around how to do this. We may have to do it based off of our website. So again, the closer we can get our community to our website, and then we've got this resource center. So I'm in recalibration mode, trying to figure out how to make that piece work. Because I think that's the key to all of this, is being the source of the resources. And of course, when we get referrals, when new clients come our way. So I had a new client call this morning. He was referred to, of course, a broker who already works with us. And he's like, my accountant's fine, but he doesn't focus on real estate agents.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to him about certain things, either he doesn't know, so again, with all of the regulations that we've got going on, or I just feel kind of lumped in with everybody else. And so one of the things that's really important for me to highlight when I have these new client calls is the different ways that we work because they're a real estate agent. So there's things that we do within our accounting firm that I would not do in a general practice. That I would not, operate bookkeeping a certain way because it wouldn't serve the masses. But again, because we know the specific needs of these agents, we're able to really refine that a lot.
We have a question from Carolyn.
Sure.
Do you have a process you go through with a potential new client where you identify them as an ideal client? In other words, do you use some kind of checklist to determine if they will be a good fit for your firm? And before you answer that, Rachel, I want to say this is a good transition to the problem of transitioning an existing firm to a niche. You had the benefit of buying into a already niched firm, which is the ideal situation. But that is very rare. Most of the time, we've got an existing practice. It's full of clients that we collected via referrals. I had that kind of practice, and I had 200 clients that were all in like a dozen different spaces, if not more, probably dozens. And so for me, I never got around to actually doing the niche thing, and I know I would have benefited from it, but I didn't know how to make the switch. And I think this leads to one of those switches, is like you gotta stop taking everybody, right? So So read the question again. How do you identify an ideal client? What's your intake process? How do you make sure you're taking the right kind of client?
Sure. So it has definitely changed over the year. I will also say that if you're looking to go from a generalized practice to a niche practice, there are elements of your ideal client profile that will be the same regardless of just the kinds of people you like to work with, right? So a really good place to start is going to be like in those psychographic, demographic qualities that of the kinds of people that you like to work with. You could probably also take a look at your existing client base, and if there's a concentration within a certain area, it might be interesting to start to frame specific workflows and stuff like that around that as well. So I used to, so they used to, where do I start? So I came in, Typeform is my friend. Kelly Parks is an amazing form builder, process builder. And so Kelly and I worked together on a questionnaire. And then I hired a client care specialist, who I love sincerely. We're actually just able to get her back after a medical leave. And so she took a look at this questionnaire, which I was very happy with because it weeded out a ton of people. I got very specific in terms of, you're okay with us connecting your bank feeds to a cloud accounting software, right? That is critical for us to do our jobs. And so we included that within the questionnaire and other kind of qualitative things as well.
So just to pause you for a second,
Yeah.
you used, to summarize, you've used an online form called Typeform.
Typeform, yeah.
And I haven't used Typeform myself, but I've experienced it. And one thing that's great is it just shows you like one question at a time.
Yep.
So prospects come in.
Yeah, it doesn't feel overwhelming.
Right. It's not like, here's a list of 20 things you need to give me before you can click submit.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so your prospect goes in and they start filling out the form to see if they're a potential client. And you've got those I call them disqualifying questions.
Yes.
Or well, we shouldn't call them disqualifying questions. They're qualifying questions, right? If you
qualifying them out the door.
Right. Yes. So if they say, to use your example, if they say, no, I'm not comfortable with connecting my bank accounts to accounting software, that's red flag.
It goes straight to, actually, I'm sorry, we may not be a good fit.
So the form itself disqualifies them, and you don't even have to talk to that person. And that's a huge time saver because when I was growing my practice, I was the sales guy for many years. And as we all are, tend to be. And 9 out of 10 people I spoke to would not be a good fit. And I wish I'd had that technology.
Right. The challenge is I think I went a little overboard. I got a little greedy. And so when I was looking at, Lisa, I wanted to work with Lisa to say, I need you to help me really refine and make really refine the client journey from beginning to end. She took a look at the questionnaire and she's like, this is like rude. She's like, this is not a good experience. And so we're in the process now of refining that a little bit. But honestly, there aren't very many clients that I have a meeting with that I think it's a bad fit. There are some that I think I would enjoy working with more than others. But because we're so niche, because the majority of our client inquiries come from referrals, and I feel like anytime you get a referral, that's already an element of a qualified lead as opposed to, a cold lead. Then there isn't a lot of
it's because Realty Tax has invested in marketing itself as a niche firm. So like the name is niched, right? Like that, you're not going to go to Realty Tax if you are in e-commerce.
Right.
You've right. And your content on your website is niched. So that's an important thing to do, right? If you don't have that, I'd focus on tailoring the content on your website to the niche you want to attract. Otherwise, everybody in the world will be filling out your form.
Right.
And it's, I guess that's why it's hard. It's one of those things that sort of snowballs where it's like really hard to get started, but then as you build the niche and as you get more and more clients in that, it gets easier and easier.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
so Carolyn asked about the app. Yes, it's called Typeform.
Yeah.
So just type in
Typeform.com.
Typeform, typeform.com.
Typeform.com. We'll take you there. They've added some nice features. So yeah, we're in the middle of refining that a little bit, making it a better client experience. And then of course, now we also have the community, which it then ends up being a little bit of a plan B. So maybe, you're not going to be in our price point. I mean, we had, for example, we want to be focusing on agents for our regular MRR, right? We want to be focusing on career agents that like working with technology, or will, even if they don't like it, but they will,
Yeah.
because they want to work with us, that want monthly bookkeeping. So one of the challenges of purchasing a niche firm is basically taking it from the seller's version of what that niche looked like to my version of what that niche looks like. And so previously it was, again, remember what all of the other accountants and bookkeepers were doing at the time, fall 2020. It was any client that needed bookkeeping and accounting and all of that stuff. We can help you with that. And so they ended up taking on a lot of clients that, after working with them, either they weren't very good clients or they ended up overselling for what they needed. So then what we've done is we've kind of, which seems to go against the grain a little bit. We're taking many of these MRR clients and saying, actually, you don't need monthly bookkeeping for the volume of transactions, like the sales, right, that you have. We actually don't need the level of attention that you need. What we also found was that clients that were paying monthly felt that were entitled to access to you monthly. And that also was not the case. And so what we've done is we've actually done a couple things. Some clients we've just let go completely. Some we've moved back to an annual engagement. So we'll do your write-up and your taxes, but we're not going to do your monthly bookkeeping because it's actually too much of what you need. Yeah. But what that means is that we can then focus our energy on, when we're doing that monthly bookkeeping, it's going to be with those top producers. It's going to be with the ones who care about what those KPIs are. We keep calculations, basically ongoing calculations throughout the year, running totals of what we can estimate the corporate tax to be for the rest of the year. We can compare that to, the installments that they were required to make the year prior, those kinds of things. But it allows us to have the time to be the highest level value of the clients who actually need it.
I love this so much. It's so against the grain of what most firms will do, which is sell as much as you can to everybody, whether they need it
and
or
MRR.
not.
MRR is king. Get those monthly subscription prices in. And it ended up being a disservice to a huge chunk of clients.
You're thinking about the clients first. You're thinking about, how do we create the most value for them? And the benefit to your firm when you move them to annual, if they don't need the monthly, is you're freeing up capacity.
Absolutely.
And having those monthly conversations takes up a lot of time. I've always said, ever since cloud accounting and bookkeeping came along, that the bottleneck in most firms that do monthly services is not the volume of transactions. It's not the number of bills. It's not any of that. It's the number of clients that you talk to. So by paring that down and only talking to the ones you really need to talk to,
right,
you're building a better firm for your people and for your clients.
And this was part of I think you've highlighted that beautifully, Blake, is that this was part of the challenge. I'm like, why are we working so hard? And yet, some of these monthly fees, honestly, were like $150, $200, $250. Right. And it feels like there's no way we can touch. So we have 350 total clients. 150 of them were pretty much annual tax clients. The rest are monthly bookkeeping. It's really hard to do monthly bookkeeping for 200 clients in a team of 5. Like, you can't.
Yeah, that's like twice as much as you really should be touching.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we might have a volume problem, but it honestly took me about 6 months to realize the problem isn't. So yes, there may be a client quality issue that we needed to address, right? That we're doing too much work. When the sellers set that expectation of what the service looked like, right? Yeah. It was, technology always works. You never have to go in and fix your bank feeds, that kind of thing. So I was trying to figure out, why do the clients right now, they feel so not taken care of, and yet we can't be doing anything more. Like, we can't
Right.
possibly be doing anything
You're
more than
maxed out.
we're already doing.
Yeah.
So I mean, besides, kind of reversing course on taking some of these monthly clients and turning them annual, what we also did was we actually ended up switching over about 75% of our clients. So 100% of the clients were on QBO when I purchased the firm. We ended up moving over about 75 of those to zero, 75% of those to zero. And then, we brought in some tech and stuff like that there as well. It's actually pretty generic. The only thing that is real estate specific from a technology standpoint is Loft 47. And that's that broker back office cloud solution. And of course, there's other contract management apps and things like that you need to plug in to the front end of that to serve a brokerage. But if we're focusing on those top producing agents, you can actually do this workflow with any industry of client. There's nothing industry specific, but it was all tied to this thing of over serving the clients or setting expectations that then nobody could live up to, right? Nobody is going to promise that bank feeds never break. So by switching them over to zero, there was a clear change that was happening between QuickBooks and Xero. Totally different platform. We love the different pricing. We love that, Xero has some other elements in it, or the different versions that allowed us to get to a super simple version that we needed. And so we actually ended up simplifying the entire workflow behind the scenes. Give everybody HubDoc, right? They've got the place to upload their bank statements because we need the monthly, because guess what, folks, bank feeds don't always work. But it was all about resetting those expectations. So on the back end, we are actually doing less work, or at least simpler, more streamlined work. But on the front end, on the client end, we're trying to get more proactive with their communications, with those. We use a different practice management software, sorry. So we use Carbon, so getting really proactive and sending out those installment reminders. We use SIFT Analytics, SYFT. That's what gives us the customized dashboarding, so the running totals of the corporate tax estimates. And so it feels more complex, but it actually demonstrates to the client that we are, specific for them and we know what they need, while at the same time actually having a much more simplified workflow.
We got the question that I knew was going to come in. Why did you move so many clients to Xero? What did you not like about QBO? Didn't QBO have a basic enough package?
So, Jungle George, yes, we probably could have downgraded them to like an easy start or something like that. For me, there were a couple of things. So first of all, we were able to get on a business plan with Xero, which gave us an extremely high discount for the first 18 months. QBO, as their prices increased, could not possibly beat those prices. So we're paying less than half of what we were paying with QBO with Xero. So that's one thing. Another thing was that we did have clients complaining about the process to fix the bank feeds. So of course, with QBO, there's a different error code for each reason why the bank feeds break. So that was another thing that we needed to do is, so it may not break because it may break because it is a 2FA issue. It may break because you had a new card. It may break because, you changed your password. So there are a few different reasons. But then the other thing was that visible change. We wanted to change their expectations on that engagement. We wanted to change what we could rely on in terms of technology. And so a really visible change from that green to that blue. Our clients actually far prefer going in when they do have to reset their bank feeds in Xero. They like the workflow to do that. Just it's a lot cleaner, a lot simpler. I think that QBO, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still use it for many clients. There's still some clients that it's a great fit for, especially the ones that we continue to collaborate with. But on the back end, if it didn't matter what GL we were on, or if we only need the client to do bank feed, we just wanted it as streamlined and simple as possible. And for us, Xero was a great fit for that.
You've looked at the technology options and you've tailored it to your niche. And that's an important thing to consider, Jungle George, and all of our participants here is you can't just take a recommendation because Rachel said, do this, unless you also happen to be serving exactly the same niche, but that's unlikely, right?
Yeah. And then if you do, call me, because I probably have some shortcuts for you, like getting stuff into Xero, but yeah.
And so if you're in construction, it's going to be probably different. If you are in software startups, it's going to be different. So that's something really important, is you can't just copy somebody's tech stack from a different niche.
We were at Deeper Weekend having dinner. I was with of course, a table full of Canadians, with like a few Americans that were there. And we were talking about our workflows. And so a good friend of mine, she's got an amazing firm in Markham, Ontario, so north of Toronto, Jade Consulting. And so she was they work with high value companies. I mean, like millions, billions, cajillions. They use Dex for everything. They do not publish something unless they have a very clear explanation of what that is for. But that's what they have to do for that client mix, or in order to serve them and to get the fees that they do. Yes. So previously, the sellers that I bought the firms from, they used Dex. We still have many clients on Dex, but they had too many clients on Dex and we're publishing things. And again, if we're only doing like $150 or $200 a month, and that includes tax returns, I'm not going to be sitting there and publishing each individual receipt. So we were talking about the differences of our workflow, and one of the Americans was like, "Oh my goodness, but you're in the same country. How can you do that?" It 100% depends on the industry that we're catering to. In my case, I'm not going to, be the receipt police for all of the different client gifts and things that agents get for their clients, but we just include that in our proposal, that we can only serve you in case of desk audit or audit review, to the extent of the information that you've provided us. So I empower them with the HubDoc. We encourage them, the more you upload, the less we have to bug you, and then let it go at that. But otherwise, it was not worth our time to be chasing them down for each of these individual transactions.
Rachel, I think that's a great way to wrap this up. Will you let our listeners, our viewers, know where they can follow you online, reach you if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. So best place is either LinkedIn, Rachel Fish, or on Twitter at Fishbooks, Fisch books.
Fisch. Thank you so much to Financial Sense for making this series possible.
Yes,
Financial Sense is accounting practice management software designed for firms that want to scale. And I will tell you 100%, if you do not have some sort of practice management software, you will not be able to grow and scale, and you will not be able to successfully niche while you do so. So check out Financial Sense. One of my favorite things about it is they prioritize easy to use above everything else. And if your practice management software isn't easy to use, you won't use it and you will not get the benefit. So that's why Financial Sense is gaining so many users these days, because who has the time to spend weeks setting up your practice management software? You want to be able to do it in like a day and start using it right away. So thanks everyone who joined us. Really appreciate having you here. Ian, Taryn, Lisa, Stephanie. It's been wonderful. Rachel, thank you so much. Great to see you.
Absolutely. And my pleasure. You too.
That is a wrap.